Hey, John, I think producer Andrew set me up on the way here.
What'd he do?
Well, I got a text from him to go pick up some beverages on the way in at the regular place that I go pick up the regular beverages, blah, 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 before the podcast.
Something irregular about the regular, you're saying?
Well, so I go into the local party store, go in there, I just got off of work, and so I'm all greasy and dirty and nasty, and my back's been out for about 4 days, so I go walking in, and I'm just kind of limping in there, and I grab a case of, you know what I'm grabbing, and I go over to the counter, and I'm at the counter, and there's like people are like, and they're all talking, and and I can hear like there's just this commotion going on behind me, and I'm just like whatever, and I pay for my purchase, and I turn around and smack dab in the middle of a TV crew. And they're all like right behind me.
Nice.
Boom mics and cameras and all that. And I'm thinking, was I just the millionth visitor? Did someone just win the lottery?
Did I win a prize?
Yeah, no, it was the, and I think Andrew put me up for this. He says he didn't, but it was the cast of Teen Mom. And I actually worked years ago on there. You do a lot more.
You were a teen mom?
No, I was
not.
I
never knew that. That's incredible.
No, I was not a teen mom. Back when I was doing a lot of dive stuff, I actually worked on their crew as a safety diver when they were doing something near water once.
Remember you telling me about that?
Yeah, and so I turn around, I'm like, oh, this is what's going on. So I got out of there. But of course, Project Excursion was sitting right outside the door with this big wheeling logo on it. So I'm sure they'll blur that out. And
well, if anybody hears this, you have our permission to use it, please.
Yeah. So if you're a fan of Teen Mom, I believe it's actually Teen Mom OG is what they're doing right now. And if you're a fan of that and you see an episode that is on Halloween Day and they are at a party store, and I don't know what they're doing at a party store, and they're outside in the pouring rain, and you see Blue Excursion with something blocked out on the back of it. That's Project Excursion.
Nice.
Which has actually been on Teen Mom OG before because they actually used it as a backdrop to hide the camera crew behind. So
nice.
Yeah, I have no affiliation with this show whatsoever except for working for them once. But
I've never seen it. I don't get cable or satellite where I live.
Yeah.
So I've never seen a single episode.
Yeah, so just a weird deal today.
Yeah,
so
fun.
But any case, this is a live. We're doing live today. We're going right to Podbean through the app. So we're going to try this out. Hopefully our listeners that are live are going to enjoy this. And then anybody who listens to this on the upload it would be next Monday, enjoys the episode as well.
Absolutely.
So, and you and I wanted to talk a little bit about International Harvester vehicles, correct?
We did, indeed.
Now, the reason we wanted to do that was, and this is actually a little past due, we had two separate people through the social medias request that we do this episode. I believe one of them was Patrick Rowe, one of our Patreon sponsors up in Alaska. I could be wrong on that. And then the other person, I don't remember what his name was. This was back almost when we started the podcast, and it was through Twitter or something, said, hey, I'm really into international harvesters, especially scouts.
Nice.
Can you guys do an episode on those? And I said, yes, we will do one in the future. And I've been putting it off. And then I guess even a third person when we were out at Wheels in the Woods, Mr. Dan Blair, who's an old wheeling friend of mine.
I remember that discussion, yeah.
You know Dan,
Yep.
He said, oh, yeah, you got to talk about scouts and stuff. So this episode is not going to be a straight up just scout episode. We want to talk about the history of International Harvester passenger vehicles from the beginning.
Yeah, I didn't realize how big of a company this was and just how long they span. Holy crap.
Yeah, so let's talk about them, and then maybe in the future do a scout episode.
Sounds good.
So let's try this today, John.
That works. Before we get going on this, I would like to give a shout out, if that's all right.
Yeah, go ahead.
To Mr. Hugh out in Fort Gratiot. Heard through a friend of a friend you listen to the show and you love it a lot. So thank you for listening. We've sent a couple stickers out your way, so hope you get them and enjoy.
Absolutely.
It's time to hit the trail, lock in those hubs, and throw it into low range. Because you are listening to Wheelin' with Keith and Johnny Orange, broadcasting from the Thin Line Off-Road Studio. They're here to talk about 4x4s, trucks, and everything to do with enjoying the great outdoors. Buckle up. Here's your hosts, Keith and Johnny Orange.
Well, John, if you asked me where we're going to start, let's start out with some 4x4 news before we get into International Harvester.
That works.
And I guess let's just start with Project XJ. I saw some pictures online. You're doing some rust repair?
Yeah. Again, I got back to a couple weeks off of working on that, trying to take care of some other stuff, so back working on that. I got the rocker panel cut out on the driver's side. One big giant mouse nest right in the middle that I did not light on fire this time, cutting it out.
Nice.
And thankfully, a lot more good metal left than I expected. I mean, it was still shot.
Okay.
The whole bottom was gone, but the sides, there was a lot more good metal left than I anticipated, which is awesome.
Okay,
and
very
it took
good.
me 2 days to find a special drill bit that I needed for cutting spot welds, but I found it. So once I get the rear seat support out, I'll be able to get going and finish mocking up for the new rocker tube, and then floor steel, and then switch to the rear.
Well, I'm pretty excited. So your September date is way gone and past.
So gone, so blown out the window. Yeah,
yeah, it's all right. At least you're making progress with it.
Oh yeah, and that's the biggest thing. It sat so long. A lot of those pictures you noted there. Well, you probably noticed, anybody who looked at them. There's a lot of brown stuff in those pictures. I assure you, that's mostly surface rust.
Oh, okay.
From sitting, is that back when it was back at your place? That was all clean metal.
All right.
So sitting for that many years in the garage, it's all surface.
You'll get there.
You'll get there.
Yeah. Nationally or internationally, we'll use the word international, even though this is not international harvester news, but internationally, I don't know if you got the latest episode of Peterson's Four Wheel and Off Road.
I don't, unfortunately, get that anymore.
Oh, I thought you did.
No, I haven't in a while, at least.
So the latest issue has two 2.8 or R2.8 Cummins swap vehicles in it. One of them being the International Harvester Scout 80 that they took up to Alaska. And what's really cool about that one is it has our sponsor, Quick Draw Brands bell housing in it.
That's awesome.
So they went to an MV4500 behind a 2.8. Apparently it worked flawlessly.
Nice.
So they actually have... last month they had more information about Quick Draw, and then this month they just, of course, said that they had purchased the product from him. There's also another Prophet's Resurrection Cruisers has another 2.8 swapped Land Cruiser in there, but it doesn't say how he made it to the H55 5-speed. So I don't know if he used a Quick Draw bell housing or went some other way.
Yeah.
And speaking of some other way, Quick Draw, I was talking to Chad maybe an hour ago, so on the phone on the way home from work, and one of his major competitors, and I'm not going to, I guess, name the competitor, but one of his major competitors has been making for some time now automatic adapters for the R2.8 Cummins, and a whole bunch of them, like dozens of them, have failed now in the last year or so.
Oh, that's no good.
And and he's getting calls daily from people who have had this, and they're just like, I am fed up with dealing with this other company, and is there anything you can do? And so he started a project a month or two ago going to the automatic, because he already does all the manual stuff. Now he's doing, I know you're not an automatic fan, but he gets a lot of people that want it. And those automatic.
I respect those decisions. A friend of mine had posted automatics are for people with no left foot.
Oh, there you go. So, like my brother.
Or this guy.
Yeah. So he ended up just saying, screw it. And he, put the time in. And he said he will be to the market with GM, Chrysler, and Ford transmission adapters for the R2.8 Cummins within a week or two.
Wow.
And so
that's a huge turnaround.
Yeah.
Wow.
So he's got those going for the various automatic transmissions. And
Nice.
He's fixing all the problems of his competitor, and not even fixing it for them. He's just redesigned the entire product.
Yeah.
And so if you're a big R2.8 Cummins listener out there and fan of that new crate motor from Cummins, and you're hearing about all the horror stories of another company's product failing, time to give Quick Draw a call, because
Absolutely.
and I know by looking at his manual adapters that he's going to make these automatic adapters right.
Oh, for sure.
So
these things are beefy, man. These are heavy duty. I love them.
Yeah, so I'm really happy to hear Chad's doing that.
For sure.
From my end, there's a few bits of news. I don't know if you saw that we finally picked up Preston's Z71.
I did, yeah. I was looking at that on my way in this morning for the show today.
Yeah.
That thing's pretty sweet.
It really is. I actually want to do a Z71 episode here in the future because there's a lot of information that I've just learned recently about that particular model of truck. So I don't want to go too much more into detail, but I can tell you the truck runs and drives. Preston is super tickled.
I saw the video of him driving around the back. That was cool.
There'll be some pictures soon of him fixing it up. So that's my biggest project right now. And then I guess one other project, mentioning Project Excursion again today. Project Excursion got to do something that probably a lot of us would absolutely love to do, but I don't think many people have ever done. Mm-hmm. I dragged a bank vault out of a bank today with it.
Dude, that's awesome.
Yes.
I was excited I got to push a dumpster with Pegasus once, but your story's way better.
So for the demolition company I work for, the site that I started out at this morning.
Wait, did you Fast and Furious that?
Pretty much.
That's awesome.
So,
there's video somewhere, right?
No, I have some pictures of some of the aftermath.
That's acceptable. We'll look later.
Well, actually, I'll show you that just real quick to get your... So I started out by removing the 4-inch thick stainless and regular steel bank vault door, and I gutted all the mechanisms from it. But I did the math on it because I went online and I said, okay, how many pounds per cubic inch, blah blah blah. And this door weighs 2,695 pounds. Oh. Now, it took I had to move it through a 28-inch door to get it outside.
Oh, geez.
And this took a lot of creative rigging and things to set up. So I had this cart that the folks back at the shop said, oh, yeah, you can put it on this cart and wheel it out of the building. And the cart is rated for 3,000 pounds. So 2,695 should be fine. This is what happened.
Nice.
Yeah, that cart's flat.
Yeah, just a little bit.
It's currently sitting on the sidewalk, and I'm wondering if some scrapper is going to steal that by tomorrow morning.
Where's it at?
You know what? I tell you what,
I've
man.
got an engine hoist with the capacity.
That would take care of a lot of problems for me if it disappeared. But
we'll talk later.
Okay.
We'll talk later.
Yeah. Okay.
What's the capacity of a Chevy 1500 truck?
Nice. You wouldn't want to put it in the bed. It'd probably crush it.
I got a guy with a 1-ton Dodge. Maybe I can borrow that.
We're having too much fun already, buddy.
Yeah.
You got anything else in 4x4 news, or do you want to museum minutes? I know we don't have much right now going on at the museum, so we can just skip.
We got a meeting coming up. I know that. I almost forgot. But
next week, let's talk about that.
Yep.
Do you have anything else in 4x4 news? Or you want to go into International Harvester?
I don't think so. Nothing off the top of my head. Oh, I made a late night sort of marketplace deal a couple nights ago.
Okay.
So I sold the rear axle from the XJ part out. About 9:45 in the evening.
Yeah.
So last minute call from a friend of mine. Asked if he could pass my number along to a friend of his who needed one like that night. And it worked out. They came out. They picked it up. So he had the guy's name was Rick and his friend Brennan.
Okay.
And they had a seriously cool 87 Comanche that had been it was lifted. I think it had 33s under it. I mean, this thing was gorgeous, man. Nice, clean green truck.
So no sketchy Craigslist deals?
No. I knew the guy. He graduated from the same high school I did, albeit, oh my God, almost 10 years after I did.
Okay.
Wow.
You're getting old, dude.
Apparently. Other than that, no.
All right. One more bit of 4x4 news that we're missing. And I know you already know about this, but for our listeners, and this is a bit of a brag, we've been watching, not that it really matters. We really don't care about the numbers or anything and how popular we are or not. But
says you.
Yeah, okay. So I've been watching, there's a website called Chartable that pulls up the information for all the different podcast services, and they actually, very similar to, say, the music charts where various songs will get up on the top of various charts.
Right.
Chartable does the same thing with podcasts,
nice.
And they do other shows as well, but on there with the podcast, they only chart the top 250 in any category.
Okay.
And so I've been trying to see if we were going to ever get on there. And as of last week, we were not only on the charts, we're number 71 in the
I love it.
in the world for automotive podcasts.
That's awesome. I meant to ask you where you got the information on that because I saw that, and that's just cool.
It's both on Apple Podcasts and on Chartable.
Cool.
We're number 71
Sweet.
in the world for automotive podcasts.
Cool.
And there's over 1,000 known automotive podcasts.
Well, we're coming for those other 70.
And then if you take a look at the 70 that are above us, there are 4 other 4x4 outdoor off-road lifestyle podcasts that have been on for years and years and years now. And so we're number 5. And, being that we've been doing this less than a year.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Number 5. It's kind of cool, just to be
right
there. Speaking of Apple Podcasts, we do have a review on Apple Podcasts, and I wish I could do a shout out, and maybe I'll try to do that the next show because I don't want to try to spend time pulling up on the computer right now.
Okay.
But
I'll have to find that, check it out.
That's something that does help us with ratings, and because most of the ratings do get pulled from Apple. I'm not a big Apple user. But
I'm not. Other than that's just what I have to use to put music on my iPod.
Okay,
that's about it.
But I did notice there's a comment on there, and it was a really nice comment. A guy said he had learned some stuff from us, so it's nice to see that people are commenting there. And if you use Apple and you want to go on there and comment on Apple, we always appreciate it. Tell us what you like, what you don't like, whatever the case may be. We want your honest feedback. Obviously we want those 5-star reviews, but we always want your honest feedback about the show and suggestions, and you can put a suggestion in there. Put it in the comments. If you want us to do something in the future, say, hey, can you please do this? And
always looking for input to make it better and just do more variety of what you guys want to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you trying to look that comment up right now?
I was going to try real quick, see if I can find it, but I'll do it later.
Yeah, we'll do it later.
They updated the software again. So.
Exactly. Back to International Harvester. So International Harvester is this huge company. You did a lot of research today.
A little bit.
I appreciate you doing that. I know quite a bit about them, mostly the Scouts and the Travelalls and things. But going way back to day one, you did a lot more research on that. So I think I'd like you to start this off, John.
That works. I learned a lot about the company going through this from their beginning till the end, and I never realized how big of a conglomerate it was. Mm-hmm. It started roots back to the 1830s. And the inventor from Virginia, he had a patent for a horse-drawn reaper.
What's a reaper? Is that like a farm equipment?
Yeah, farm equipment. So agricultural, it's something used for harvesting like wheat and stuff from a field.
Okay.
And it just, from there, up to 1902, they merged with a couple other companies and formed what became known as the International Harvester Company.
Okay, and so they did a lot of like construction equipment.
Agricultural machinery, construction, trucks, cars, household, other commercial stuff. They even dabbled in the late years into a military, and they actually made a jet engine tractor prototype.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
I'd like to see that.
So their reach is huge.
Yeah.
I never realized that.
We're specifically kind of talking about their passenger vehicles and trucks, which, correct me if I'm wrong, that started out with the Model A Auto Wagon in 1907?
Yeah. Yep.
So that was their first, actual vehicle, not tractor, but their first road-driven vehicle?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. And they made that for a number of years until they eventually renamed it, like the motor truck or something?
Yep. So that was renamed in 1910. And that started in, they did trucks from about 1907 to 1975.
Now, from what I understand, that model, the Model A Auto Wagon / motor truck, is considered to be one of the forerunners to the successful modern pickup truck. Now, we do know that Ford made the first official pickup truck in 25, but they were building like flatbed type vehicles that were really closely related to a modern pickup truck way before Ford was even doing it.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so they really are, for pickup truck fans, International Harvester was kind of the first to the scene with that. That's pretty cool. And they continued. I know that they made a lot of vehicles during World War One. For the World War, they didn't make 4-wheel drive vehicles yet. That came years later. But during World War One, International Harvester did make a lot of transport vehicles for the war effort, which of course that's like 1916, 1917, around there.
Yeah.
So they were really early in the automotive game, and people don't realize.
I never realized it went that far back.
I have people I talk to every once in a while that tell me they never realized that International Harvester ever made vehicles even to begin with.
For the longest time, I didn't either.
Oh, really?
I had heard it just International.
Huh.
And one thing I never realized, International Harvester Company, International Harvester, it's all the same. It's just different years of production. They changed how the name was displayed on a lot of stuff.
Kind of like Jeep, Willys Overland, Kaiser Willys, all that. It was different corporate mergers, but the same parent company stayed around.
Essentially, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
One of the cool things, a lot of them, I didn't realize a lot of the early trucks were just wood-paneled cabin chassis.
Okay.
Which, that was cool. The true Woodies.
Yeah. Yeah, you didn't want termites in those things.
No.
For sure. I know that International was pretty early in the 50s somewhere with 4-wheel drive.
56 or 57, I think it was.
I'm taking a look at, you actually sent me a copy of your notes here,
yes.
And it says 56 onward. So that's about the same time that, GM didn't even offer factory built pickup trucks till 60. Till 57. So they actually beat GM by a year. They beat Ford. I think Ford was around the same time. So they were all right in the mid 50s there. Yeah. But those would have been in their Travelalls and their little pickup trucks, and I don't know all the model designations of the pickup trucks at the time.
Oh, there's so many. There's so many different series of a lot of those trucks.
A lot of them started out like B. They had like B1100.
There's B's, R's. I want to say F's maybe. There was so much information. It was hard to condense it all just to this. And I know, well, of course, we're going to talk about the Scout. But we're going to, at some point, do a dedicated episode just to the Scout, for sure. There's so much information on those things.
Oh, yeah. And we'll talk about those even a little bit later here.
Oh, yeah.
Going back to kind of the beginnings of the company, they were made in, mostly in Akron, Ohio. Is that correct?
Yes.
So they were not a Detroit Big Three. They were a little bit out. I mean, Akron's only 3 hours away.
But they were direct competitors of the Big Three back then.
Yeah, and I know that their trucks early on got that reputation. People called them like corn binders, and they're tractors for the road.
Yeah,
and they were made to be very heavy duty vehicles. They didn't make like passenger cars like convertibles and sports coupes and station wagons. They didn't do that. They were solely in the vehicles for farmers and for heavy duty use.
Yeah, and that seems to be throughout their history, even down to some of the home appliances that they actually made were all directed towards farmers.
Oh, okay.
And like the Travelall, it was actually a right-hand drive model car.
Okay.
And it was hugely popular in a lot of, bad areas with bad roads because of the high ground clearance. It just handled things better than other modes of transportation did at the time.
Well, I mean, the Travelall was available in right-hand drive. They weren't all right-hand drive.
I missed that part.
I think, actually, I'm going back to your notes and stuff. The right-hand drive model was back. That wasn't the Travelall back then. That was the auto truck or whatever they called it.
Right. My bad.
Or the motor truck.
Yeah.
And then, but the Travelall was a kind of the first suburban type vehicle that they made. And it was a big, you get it in a panel truck. You could also get it in originally a 2-door big SUV. Now, International does have, and I know this, and I don't see it in your notes, through the Travelall line, International has the distinction of being the first mass-produced American 4-door SUV.
See, I did not know that. That's cool.
So the Suburban of the time was a 2-door and then eventually a 3-door, where they had 2 doors on the passenger side and 1 on the driver's side. And International did that, I think, in their first series in the 50s. But International was the first one to say, you know what, we need a lot more doors, we need a lot more room. And so they were the first full-size four-door SUV that was available in the U.S.
I did not know that. That's cool.
Actually, that would be the first four-door full-size SUV, period, because they were only beat by a couple of years by some of the makings from Toyota and some very rare models of Willys, but those would be considered medium or small four-wheel drives. Those were not considered to be your large full-size vehicles.
Yeah.
So the Travelall, I mean, continuing on there with the Travelall there, the Travelall was it was run until I think about 75 was the last year of the Travelall. That was they through a couple models. They had kind of the rounded
4 different
one.
generations of it, they call it.
Oh, it's 4. I thought it was 3. Okay, so
yeah.
Oh, yeah. On the top of my head,
I think they're counting the Travelette as one of those. I could be wrong on that.
Now, the Travelette was that the one where it had like a little, it was almost like an Avalanche where it had the little open bed in the back of it? I think they're pretty rare.
I honestly don't recall.
I could be wrong, but I think so. Either that or it was a shorter wheelbase. It was like the first crew cab pickup truck.
Yes, that I know.
Yeah. So they, in fact,
4-door crew cab, 6 passengers.
And it was the first in 61.
First 4-door of its time.
So that's something else they have the distinction of building the first factory crew cab.
Yeah.
Because Ford did not build the first factory crew cab until 1980.
Oh, wow.
There are
right about the end of these guys.
70s and 60s Ford crew cabs were all built by a Ford conversion company authorized and built in-house, but they didn't technically factory build a crew cab till 80.
Yeah. I didn't know that. Nice.
Yeah, Chevy, I think it's 73. So yeah, they're all the way back there in 61.
Sweet.
Once again, just they were industry leaders.
Yeah,
industry leaders.
Oh, that's cool.
Well, buddy, I think I see producer Andrew waving his "It's break time"
Sounds good.
Watch at us. So let's take a quick break, and when we come back, I still want to talk more about these internationals. So there's so much to talk about.
Oh yeah. So those of you folks who are listening to us live here, we'll be back in a few minutes.
Yep.
Have you heard the good news? Now there's a local paper that people just can't seem to get enough of. It's the Thumbprint News. The Thumbprint News is free and full of interesting stories that focus on what's important in our lives. Stories that touch on this area's rich history, unique places, and the diverse cultures and people. You'll be in the know when you read the Thumbprint News. Go to thumbprintnews.com and read the paper online for free today.
And we're back. John, during break there, you were mentioning to me quickly that in the 40s and 50s, International branched out from passenger vehicles, besides the tractors. Well, everybody knows they make tractors, but they got into a lot of other things. And you wanted to mention a few. I don't want to talk forever about them, but mention some of the things that International got into in the kind of the baby booming years there.
Okay. Well, this wasn't so much the baby booming stuff. This was sort of later throughout the production, more into the 50s and 60s. So there were a lot of home lawn and garden stuff that they did. And what I didn't realize, Cub Cadet has its origins with International Harvester.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I didn't either. I never knew they went that far back. And there's so much to that. They had a lot of the walk-behind mowers, snow blowers, shredders, tillers, compact garden tractors, power washers. And in 1981, Cub Cadet was actually sold to MTD, thus the end of their affiliation.
Okay. They also made home appliance, refrigerators and stoves, and I've seen those before. I understand that they're getting to be quite rare and collectible. I know that I'm on a couple of, I think one of them is actually kind of a little shout out here. It's called International Scout buy, sell, trade on Facebook. And there's a couple times where people have popped up the International refrigerators for sale for man cave refrigerators.
Those date back to the 40s.
Yeah.
And what pretty neat little detail on that, on the TV show Friends, the refrigerator in Monica's apartment was about a 1950 International Harvester refrigerator.
Oh, I never knew that.
I didn't either.
That's really cool.
Just a lot of cool stuff comes up in this
Where
research.
the heck did you find that?
I have my sources.
Okay, all right. That's really neat, man.
Yeah, the cool thing, like I mentioned earlier, this is one of their lines they branched out to try and get more into farmers' homes with that.
Okay.
So a lot of farmers, due to electrification projects in the U.S., were getting power and electricity for the first time. And this was their, these guys were using their tractors and their implements. All right, now we're expanding into this stuff more for the home.
I also know that International Harvester had a lot to do during World War II with some of the war effort, and I'm going to mention briefly. International Harvester 6-wheel drive trucks are fairly rare to see. We actually have a mutual friend, Ken, who lives up in near you, who has one. He may consider taking to the Mora.
That's awesome.
The majority of those during World War II saw use over in like the Russian fronts and Eastern Europe, and were left there. They were too heavy and bulky to be brought back. So there's not a lot of surviving examples in North America today, and he has a beautifully restored one.
A lot of those were made for overseas use.
Yeah.
There's they did some light, medium, and heavy duty applications for military. He said there was a van, a couple different tractors, trucks, things like that. And you mentioned the war efforts too. Well, in early 51, the Army actually contracted through Springfield International Harvester to produce some of the M1 rifles.
That's so cool. You need one of those for your collection, buddy.
I want two. I want one to display and then one maybe for the Mora.
That would be really cool.
It was actually cool. There little over 330,000 of them were manufactured, so they're out there. But I'm sure they're hard to find.
Yeah, no, that would be really neat to find, especially if you had like a Scout off-road vehicle or something. You could, put International rifle in there.
That would be cool.
Well, very, very cool. So back to talking about, we were just before the break, we were talking about the Traveller big station wagon, or Travelall. I'm sorry, not Traveller. That's a different model. We'll get to that in a minute. The Travelall, and the Travelall, the last generation of it. This is just kind of a little shout out. I don't know if he's a listener right now or not, but an old friend of mine, Matt, who owns Bracket Auto Parts in Algonac, Michigan, he bought a last generation, so the square boxy one. Travelall, and
cool.
He drives it to work when it's nice outside. The thing is so beautiful.
I believe it.
Absolutely love those things. And something else about the trucks before we get into maybe say the Scouts or the more off-road oriented, something that I don't see in your research notes here that I know is that the International 1-ton trucks have the distinction of being one of only 2 1-ton pickup trucks that ever came available with a Dana 70 front axle. Yeah.
I didn't realize that axle went that far back.
Yeah, the Dana 70, so most of your 1-tons have a Dana 60 in the front. International used them for the longest time. Now, the earliest versions were big 6-lug. They were the same as like the Rockwell, deuce and a half axles, bolt pattern. And they were drum brake, closed knuckle axles. They're not very desirable, very good axles, but they're still very stout. And then Dodge did use the Dana 70 in limited quantities in the 1-tons in the 70s. But for the most part, and then there's some military applications as well. Yeah. But for a commercially available 1-ton pickup truck, the Dana 70 front, the largest user of that was International. So, nice. I mean, it goes back to that overkill, beefy farmer use, just crazy, like, Dana 60 would suffice, but let's put a Dana 70 in. So
real quick, I've been handed a note from producer Andrew here.
Oh, geez.
Apparently my mom is listening to us live. So first off, hi, Mom.
Well, hi, Patty. How you doing?
And so shout out to my mom, Patty. And then the note we have here is apparently my grandfather had one on the farm, a Scout and tractor.
Now, did you do you have on the note there whether he had a Scout 80 or a Scout 800?
Nope.
Okay.
I'd love to try and find that out, but I don't know if anyone in our family is going to know enough
Scout
about
2.
that.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'd love to try and find that out sometime.
That would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
I
wonder whatever happened to it.
we keep like kind of bouncing around the subject, and we keep saying Scout. I think it's finally time for us to talk about the International Harvester Scout, which is arguably the most popular International Harvester
for sure.
model for the off-road enthusiast of all time.
Yeah, I always heard, from when I can remember hearing about the Scout for the first time, I heard it as International. I never knew it had anything to do with International Harvester, though, which it sounds stupid, I know, but just hearing it referred to as the International Scout or the Scout on its own, I never connected the dots. It was a realization of like, wow, this is way bigger than I thought it was.
Yeah. The Scout, when it came out, as you know, was a direct competitor to the CJ model of the Jeep.
Yeah.
And it was immediately a success. That first model was the little 800, smaller vehicle, had some rounded lines, but it was a little more refined. Still very rugged vehicle, but a little more refined than an open-top Jeep.
Yeah.
And immediately that caused both, well, as we've talked in previous episodes, Willys to take notice and come out with the Jeepster, and Ford to come out with the Bronco, and then a little bit later, Chevy to come out with the Blazer.
Yeah.
They all said, oh, wow, there is a market for these small SUVs.
Oh, yeah.
But, once again, International being on the front line and International being the first to the market, they came out with that Scout all the way back, I think it was, 61 or something like that?
1961 model year, so it
Yeah.
debuted in 1960.
I keep saying 800. The Scout 80,
80,
yeah.
yeah.
The Scout 80, yeah.
The cool thing, the design started in the late 50s. Like you said, as a competitor to the CJ. Total development time, 24 months.
Really?
That's all it took.
That's insane.
Yeah. That's absolutely insane. Such a short time to come out with something so successful.
Now
It's nuts.
That probably seems like a long time to certain people, but keep in mind that a whole new model of vehicle, usually even by today's standards with all the computer-aided design and everything,
Oh, yeah.
is usually a 4 to 7 year process.
Oh, yeah.
So 22 years, that's pretty crazy. But they saw something that needed to come out there, and that's what they did. So
They did it, and it did well.
Yeah. Now, so that first generation, I know they had they had a slant 4 as the original engine. Not a lot of power. It was a short wheelbase vehicle. Not a lot of room under the hood. And they did kind of a massive redesign of the Scout line for 1972. And that became the Scout 2, is what it was called.
Yep. That was 74 or 72.
72,
Yep.
yeah. And now the Scout 2 was a little boxier, a little more rugged. Didn't have those rounded lines anymore.
Yeah.
And the Scout 2 is the Scout that a lot of collectors today, originally, even just 3 or 4 years ago, Scout 2s could be picked up pretty cheaply. But people realized that they were, especially as the early Ford Broncos to restore, prices went through the roof and became unobtainable. People started looking to the Scout 2 because it's still a very capable off-road vehicle. And for restoration purposes, there's a pretty strong market for parts. So they started restoring these Scout 2s, and now the prices are reaching Bronco prices, early
Really?
Bronco prices. Oh,
Wow.
for a clean one, yeah.
I've never looked at a used one. The extent of what I've had looking at used ones is when I went with you the one night to check the 2 that guy had out.
I was just going to mention that. I thought you went with me. Yeah, we went to look at those 2 for sale. My son was really a big fan of the Scout 2.
Yeah.
And he kind of wanted one of those for his first vehicle, and I would not have been opposed to that. But, as you know, something with the airbags, as much driving, going back and forth, and
with modern stuff, yeah, I mean it makes sense.
I think we're still going to try to look for him for a project vehicle someday.
I support this decision.
Yeah, back to not just the Scout though, all International vehicles. There's without getting into the engines too much, I know one of the most popular engines they use is the 345 V8. And a lot of power, a lot of low-end torque. It was a very reliable engine. It was basically a tractor engine. But part of the issue that people had, which from what I understand is starting to go away because some of the aftermarket has finally stepped up, but part of the issue they've had with restoring and keeping old Internationals running is some of the parts availability for those early International V8 engines and the 4-cylinder International engines. Kind of hard to find some things.
I believe it. As any line ages, stuff gets harder and harder to find, and that's always the trick with keeping something original is, well, can you support it? Can you fix it?
Well, International Harvester still exists as a tractor manufacturer, but they sold, and I'm jumping forward a little bit to kind of the end of them, but they sold all of their auto parts business, I think in 90, 91?
91. Yeah, it was sold to Scout Light Line Distributors Incorporated.
So the problem is you can't go into an international tractor dealership anymore. You used to be able to do that, but you can't go in anymore to get parts for your Scout or for your maybe a few things, maybe a few engine parts, but you really can't get that. Now, the other thing is problem with, say, the Scout 2 is they were very, very rust prone.
I believe it.
And
a lot of those early ones were. Trying
to get a windshield frame that's rust-free or a hood, those are very hard. The body tubs, there was actually a couple companies up till a couple years ago that were making them out of fiberglass, and they've stopped doing that now.
It's funny you mentioned the rust-prone and fiberglass. So dating back to the original Scout, it was almost a plastic body. It was prototyped out, I think, by GM. They did a scale model of it in plastic. And the production costs at the time were just deemed too expensive, so they went back to steel.
By GM. Now,
I believe it was GM. I might have that wrong.
Oh, okay. Well, I could see that because I know that GM, through their Corvette line with the fiberglass and things like that, they did help some other companies to develop those technologies.
And it was early on. They did a lot of plastics. Again, I'm fairly certain it was GM.
Okay.
They did a lot of plastic productions in World War II, so they had the existing line there, which is why they did the prototyping and all that through them.
But it didn't stick. They ended up
it was just so expensive at the time to do it.
But
thankfully they didn't, because that plastic would have probably just crumbled and we'd have none left today.
Well, speaking of that, though, I think for the Scout, it was technically not going to be called a Scout 3. It was the Scout SSV.
Okay.
The Scout SSV, and you're looking at your notes, and you're like, I have no idea.
I remember if I wrote that down.
You didn't.
Okay.
The Scout SSV.
I remember seeing Scout SS.
The idea was it was going to come out in 81.
Okay.
And some people called it the Scout 3, but that's not the technical name for it.
Yeah.
And it was a little bit more of a refined version of the Scout 2. It was a little sportier, and it was meant to originally be like a supplementary model to go along with continued Scout 2 sales.
Gotcha.
And it was supposed to be something that was going to bring them more into the 20th century. It was it was either a plastic or a fiberglass body. If you look one up, they're pretty cool vehicles. The front end kind of almost throws back to a late 50s Ford truck, scaled down. The back end of it reminds me of almost like a late 90s Chevy Tracker.
Okay.
They've got this Targa kind of thing going, and a pretty neat looking little vehicle.
Check that out for sure.
Only 2 models are known to exist, or 2 surviving examples. They built a couple prototypes. Just recently, in the last, I would say 2 years, a third has surfaced, but only very limited information is out about it.
Gotcha.
And there has been rumor that maybe as many as a dozen to 20 were made and for crash testing and things. But so they got really, really, really close to coming out with the SSV, but they decided to end the passenger vehicle production, the Scout production, in 1980.
I wonder where the rest of those ended up. If they're stored in some warehouse collecting dust somewhere, maybe.
They probably were crushed. They were crash test vehicles, but now what's interesting towards the end of the Scout production line, and once again going back, I don't see anything in your notes here, but this would be of interest to you. The last couple, I think it was the last 3 years of the International Scout, you could get it with a diesel.
Ooh.
Yeah, you get
that.
You could get it with a little inline diesel.
That's awesome.
And they built a lot of them. Unlike some of the rarer Jeep models and Chevy models where they only maybe made a couple dozen.
Yeah.
Diesel Scouts are readily available. You can find those for sale pretty regularly.
That's awesome.
And so that was kind of a cool thing that they did. And as interest too, in 1980 and only 1980, for the very last model year, they switched out from their Dana 20 transfer case to a Dana 300 transfer case.
I've seen those.
But it's the short output version, which is great for a short wheelbase vehicle.
I know those very desirable, and those go for a ton of money.
Yes, they do.
Oh, my God.
It was a 1 year only Scout only.
I think when I first started looking into the Dana 300 cases, Oh my God. I was finding them from the Jeeps left and right, 100, $150 all day. The Scout ones, I want to say, were like $300 to $500. It's like,
Absolutely.
holy crap.
Well, it's 1 year only. So
Yeah, I didn't realize that.
the Scout, similar to the like the Jeepster that you have, was available in the half cab, full roof, pickup version. They had a lot of different versions of it as well. Go ahead. You look like you're going to say something there.
I was going to count something up because I know I had, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, looks like main variations of them.
So even more so than the Jeepster and the CJ line.
Yeah. And that's, one thing I did have, the Scout production. So during the 20-year period, 1960 to 1980, 532,674 were produced.
That's quite a few.
Yeah. And there was another spot. I know the same basic design was used. The basic sheet metal was pretty much the same all the way until production stopped October 21st, 1980.
Huh.
Which, it was a little over 8 years before I was born. A little less than.
As a bit of interest to the off-road and 4x4 crowd, for many years, the Scout 2 did use Dana 44 axles, front and rear.
Yep, 1974, Dana 44's power steering and disc brakes became standard.
Yes. But take caution there if you're looking to swap a Scout Dana 44 into something else. The width of them is almost perfect for an older Jeep, for a Wrangler or something. But the problem with the Scout Dana 44 is the outers, stub splines are completely unique to the Scout.
Oh, that's a bummer.
It really is. And so I had a buddy years ago who didn't know that. He was up in the UP. He had pulled one out of a Scout, rotted out Scout, and thrown it into his, I think it was a TJ Wrangler, and was wheeling with it, and he broke the stub shafts, and he went to go get stub shafts from like a Chevy Dana 44 or, commonly available Dana 44 stuff, the old 30 spline stuff, and it didn't fit.
Bummer.
Yeah, so he had to get...
Is it Lucas?
No, it's a guy you wouldn't know. But... it just that's a word of caution for swapping. It's not bad stuff. It's not lemon stuff, but it has unique spline counts. It has unique lengths. Yeah, hard to find parts. But
Never fun when dealing with old stuff like that. But that does add a nice element of challenge to it. If you're going to build it for something like that, one, make sure you have spare parts.
Yeah, for sure. Kind of to complete out the Scout history there, something that's interesting too that I don't know if you knew about this. But earlier you mentioned right-hand drive. The Scout 2 and even the Scout 80 were both widely available in right-hand drive for postal carriers, for rural postal carriers. And
I have seen those before.
For many, many years, it was the only four-wheel drive option for snowy, mountainous, rural areas. Was the Scout, because when the Jeep came out with the Jeep Dispatcher, which was the Jeep's version of the right-hand drive, they were two-wheel drive only. Now,
I know where one of those is unfortunately sitting in a scrapyard.
A number of people with the Dispatcher did use parts from a CJ5 to convert them to four-wheel drive, but contrary to what many will have you believe, Jeep never did build a four-wheel drive, CJ postal vehicle. They did make a four-wheel drive XJ and JK and things like that many years later. But for almost 20 years, the only four-wheel drive postal vehicle you could get was an International Scout.
Interesting.
So, they've seen a lot of service there, too. That was.
I wish this one was in better shape, the one in the scrapyard I referred to, because that'd be very cool to get that thing. It's an old, DJ something or other?
Dispatcher,
DJ100 maybe?
DJ5.
Yeah, there's like a 4-inch tree growing through the bed of it right now. It's pretty sad. It's a cool truck. But
before we close out the actual passenger vehicle section, I think it is interesting to note that for the last 5 years of passenger vehicle production for the international passenger vehicles, that they only produced the Scout from 76 to 80. Because prior to that, their Travelall and their pickup truck line was all done by 75.
Yeah, I was going to say, I remember reading that.
So the last thing they produced for a number of years was the Scout, and then they eventually discontinued the Scout as well.
Bummer.
And you were buying those, by the way. You didn't have like international car dealers. You bought your international from an international tractor dealer.
That's just awesome.
Yeah,
That is so cool.
So that's where you get them from. Let's take a quick break, John. And when we come back, let's talk about International's influence in modern off-road vehicles and modern 4x4 vehicles.
Sounds good. There's cool details on engines I didn't know about.
Exactly. Hey, it sounds like it's time to swap out that old engine for something better, John.
Yeah, man, but I have so much into my trans and transfer case set up already. I don't want to change those too.
Sounds like you need to call Quick Draw Brand Adapters. They specialize in conversion bell housings for nearly all diesel and gasoline engines, including the new 2.8R Cummins.
You know, I like weird engines up. I want something different.
Then you definitely need to visit QuickDrawBrand.com today. They have those hard-to-find parts. They also have used diesel engines available. You can call them at 513-446-9654.
Cool, I'll do that. See what they have. Thanks.
Been married 10 years to the farmer's daughter. Wait a minute. Yeah, okay.
Who sings that?
I don't know. The International Harvester Country song?
Yeah.
I can't remember.
Pretty sure it's Craig Morgan. Should probably keep it that way.
Nice. International, like we talked about, closed out in 1980.
Yep.
For their passenger vehicles. But of course, they're still in business today building medium and heavy duty trucks.
Yeah.
But you had said, well, actually, let me, before we completely close out of that, they are back a little bit in the passenger truck category.
Oh.
Yes. This model year, so 2019 model year, GM, as you know, came back with their medium duty line, their 4500, 5500.
I didn't know they stopped.
Yeah, they stopped in 09. Yeah, and they came back. So
Nice.
they had a 10-year hiatus. And what's interesting is GM and International, or Ford and International, had a relationship for many years.
Yeah, that was something I didn't know about.
Let's get into that for a minute.
Yeah.
But now they have a relationship, and we actually get into why they do. They have a relationship with GM now, and they rebadge the GM truck, the Duramax powered 45, 55, 65, and 7500 series truck, as
Those are
an
big trucks.
They're big, but they're a regular pickup cab, but they rebadge them as an International. So they're not made by International.
Not affiliated still.
But they have an
That's cool.
affiliation. They have an international steering wheel,
Yeah.
international grill. So international's kind of back, but only in like the medium duty market. They're not back in the passenger light truck market yet.
Yeah.
Yet. There is actually rumors that may. I've heard some rumors being in our Detroit area that they might start offering 3/4 and 1 ton pickups again soon.
That'd be cool.
That are still going to be rebadged GMs, but it's a step back into the market.
Well, if they'd love any free advertising and discussion on the show, we'd be glad to evaluate a couple of those vehicles for a couple
We
of
could
years
definitely
for 'em.
use an international crew cab like 4500 4-wheel drive.
Oh, yeah.
As our tow vehicle for wheeling.
Well, I'll take anything and try it out.
All right.
You want it torture tested? Done.
So, John, you said you wanted to talk about something with engines or something?
Yeah, so what I didn't realize, let me find back where I started this. So in 1986, they changed the corporate name to Navistar International. Mm-hmm. And they, like you said, they continue making the trucks and school buses and engines under the International name. Well, Navistar International has a subsidiary company that does truck engines.
Yes.
And I think everybody here is going to more commonly know that as the Ford Power Stroke.
Well, yes, but even
Only up to 2010 though.
but even before it was called the Power Stroke, International supplied the diesel engines for Ford. So
okay.
I think it was 86, might have been 85, when the first mass produced, because they toyed with some diesel engines earlier on, but the first mass produced Ford diesel pickup trucks had a 6.9 V8 in them, naturally aspirated, no turbo, and it was made by International.
That thing had to be a dog.
It was. But the 6.9 was the predecessor, and it's the same block and head design as the 7.3, the famous 7.3 Ford diesel.
Yeah.
Which originally came out without a turbo, and it was a dog as well.
I didn't know that either.
And then in 1991, it received a turbo from the factory, but those are all international engines. Those are not Ford engines.
Huh. I never knew a lot of that. I just, like I said, I never realized the reach this company had, even up until today. And there goes my pen.
Yeah, there you go. So, but like you were saying, they, under Navistar International, supplied engines specifically to Ford Motor Company all the way to 2010.
Yeah, and then Ford took over, and the 6.7 liter Power Stroke was Ford's first design based off a lot of the original stuff.
Well, now this is part of the, and if anybody from International is listening, I'm only going to gloss over a little bit because I've read a lot of different conflicting reports on this. But apparently, the dreaded 6-liter Ford diesel, which was an international design, the one that was really a lemon engine, was an international engine. But what happened was Ford supposedly put some parts on that engine, specifically in the intake and EGR design, that International had not designed. They designed the block and heads. And the two companies got into a huge dispute over the warranty issues on the 6-liter engine. And they ended up in court. There was lawsuits. There was all these other things. And International, and so Ford knew that they were going to be parting ways. So they went into a crash course redesigning their engine line.
Gotcha.
And International and Ford did, unfortunately, part ways after a nearly 30-year partnership.
Huh. Wow.
But, International, as you know, now, like I just said a few minutes ago, has moved over to partner with GM.
Yeah. So they just gotten rid of the EGR, they'd have been fine.
Well, yeah, it was more than just that, but here's my opinion on this, because this is something that actually fascinated me, being a diesel guy and being a Ford truck guy. I have read into the reports, I've read into all sorts of different things on it, news articles, and when it comes down to it, I don't fault either company. I think that International and Ford both did things that were, questionable, not illegal or bad or anything like that, but I think they both didn't. I think it was a story of the right hand not talking to the left.
Gotcha.
I think that's what it was.
Both a little bit at fault kind of thing.
Yeah, I think they were both just a little bit, and I think unfortunately there was a lot of miscommunication. And I know Ford was going through financial troubles and some restructuring at the time, and I think it was just that. I think it was unfortunate, and I think there's an opening for the two to partnership again in the future. But I don't know. But when it comes down to it, I love the 7.3 International engine that's in my Excursion.
A lot of people do. We had again. I think I mentioned this once before. A customer at my prior place of employment. Thing had, I think, 380,000 miles on it. It was an Excursion with the 7.3. And he just kept getting it fixed. He loved that truck.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was a nice truck. It needed work, but he loved it.
They make a heck of a great engine, International does.
Oh, yeah. I've seen one of the pistons from one of those. Again, same place of employment. We had, it was this dished piston that was always in the back room. We had like thumbtacks and paper clips in it. I never knew what it was from, so I asked one day, and when we used to do engine work, we had this piston that just showed up one day, and it never left. So there's a piston for 7.3 sitting in the back counter.
Oh, okay.
It's pretty cool. It's huge, too.
What's International doing these days? Besides, we said a little bit the partnership with GM, but like their big trucks, what else do you know about them, John?
A lot of big trucks. It's about all I know on it. I didn't look too much into that. I know we were more focusing on the automotive side for passenger vehicles like the Scouts and stuff like that. So I didn't look too much into the big trucks.
Well, all right. Like you said, the big trucks we don't know a ton about. I know that they make all the way up to semi-truck size.
Yeah.
They make some massive heavy-duty trucks.
Oh, yeah.
Speaking of the heavier-duty trucks, though, and this is something that is, I would say, not very well known by most of the 4x4 and off-road crowd at this point. But a few companies out there, and I'm gonna do one shout out, and his name's Cody, and he is making these Cody Fried or Friday. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. He's making adapters to go from the Internationals to like some of the Ford transmissions. And I think there's another company, Farmstrong, that's maybe doing the same.
Heard of them.
The DT466 inline international engine, which came out in the probably late 80s, early 90s. I'm not sure the exact year of it.
Sounds like a big engine.
They
just put letters and numbers. It just sounds big.
It is physically only like an inch or two bigger than a 5.9 Cummins.
Oh, okay.
And it has an inline Bosch injection pump on it.
Ooh.
And it's a mechanically injected diesel. My dad's company had a couple of them in some mid-90s international trucks. Extremely reliable.
I believe it.
Very powerful engines. And you can buy those out of the medium-duty series trucks pretty cheaply. Guys, $500-$600 all day long are getting these old DT466s.
Wow.
And now there's adapters available to put them in Ford Super Duty trucks, to put them in Chevy trucks. And there's a number of people who have done it. And
it's called a DT466.
Yes, a DT466. And there's a number of people that believe now this is going to be the next 5 or 12 valve Cummins run, basically, because the 12 valve Cummins has gotten to the point where a good run and driving doesn't need rebuild engine is in that $3,000 plus range, and you can pick up a DT466 for $500 all day long.
Maybe time to stockpile now.
Well, yeah, and that's kind of the thing, and I think they might be out of production as well now.
Gotcha.
But it's a great engine, and there's now adapter plates available to go to commonly available
cool
3/4 and 1 ton transmissions.
Maybe like that NV4500 or that Tremec.
Yeah, quite possibly. Quite possibly. I don't know if Chad at Quick Draw is making anything for the DT466 yet. Yeah, he makes something for everything, doesn't he?
Yeah.
But it's a good way to finish out things for the 4x4 crowd. We didn't talk too much about an off-road history of International, but besides talking about the Scout itself.
I think a lot of that kind of fits in. And again, we mentioned we're going to do a specific Scout episode at some point too.
I'd like to get my friend Dan on. He's been a huge Scout fan for years. He's got that Scout 2, and I did reach out to him, but he didn't get back. I think he's probably busy at work. I know he's still active military, and
gotcha.
he gets.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, exactly. Dude, I like internationals. I do. I
am fascinated by this so much more than I was before I started doing the research on this.
Oh, really?
I didn't know much about them before, and I just, like I said, I never realized how big they were and how influential they were in the off-road and automotive world entirely.
Very much
crazy.
So. Very much so. It seems to me, if you look back at international history, that every major advancement especially in the body styles of vehicles, was started by International.
Oh, yeah.
They were the first, closed cab SUV. They were the first crew cab. They were the first 4-door SUV full size.
Yeah.
They were arguably the first pickup truck. I mean, first, man.
They go so relatively unmentioned or uncommented for so much of the evolution of the history of it I never knew. I never knew anything like it.
I would love to see International. International's a hell of an engine manufacturer too, especially with them partnering with GM now. And GM, now granted, GM had a lot of teething problems with the Duramax when it came out, but now the Duramax is a heck of an engine. I would love to see what International and GM's partnership is going to produce in the next decade.
Oh, yeah.
So I'd love to see him come back to the light truck market. I'd love to see him bring back a Scout type vehicle. I think
that would be cool.
Chad was talking about that, where they took that Nissan and basically reworked it to look into a modern Scout at Overland Expo. So
nice.
Who knows? The future of International might be back in passenger vehicles. If not, I respect what they do with the big vehicles.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's definitely a necessity.
Yeah. John, you got anything else, buddy?
Nothing I can think of at the moment.
I think we did a lot better job with this one than I thought.
I like it.
Research wise and all that. But I
hope our minor equipment issue with our live and pausing, as I understand.
That's all right. That's all right.
Yeah, it's funny.
I am hoping that the couple of people that asked us to do this episode like this, because we're going to do a scout episode in the future, if you have any more suggestions, if you say, well, listen, I think you guys glossed over this too quick or whatever, and you want us to talk more about a certain part of International Harvester history,
we'll add it in.
Reach out. Hit us on 4x4 Talk. Hit us on Twitter. We actually have a lot more people following us on Twitter now at Wheelin'.
Nice.
So
I'm still not getting to Twitter. I'm sorry.
I know. You can email us. There's a lot of different ways to reach us. So, and then I think actually one of the best ways to do it now that we know how it works is send us a comment on Apple Podcasts, because it's no longer iTunes, it's Apple Podcasts. Put a comment on Apple Podcasts and say, hey, this is what I'd like to see you do in the future. I guarantee at least every couple of weeks we're going to check the Apple Podcast comments, and if you can comment on there what you'd like us to do, we are our ears are open. We're willing to do it.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
John, unless you got anything else, why don't you do your thing, buddy?
I think that's all I got. So thanks for listening, and have a good one, everybody.